As the year winds down and we leave 2025 behind, what lays ahead? We're looking at the issues and people most likely to make news in 2026. What about inflation and affordability? Is there relief on the way? As artificial intelligence grabs hold, who will hold the power to regulate it? There looks to be a battle for control. Plus, Florida lawmakers launch into the legislative session right after the holidays. Can the governor get his budget priorities approved in his final year in office? Chris Hand joins me today on This Week in Jacksonville. Thanks for being with us. Government law attorney Chris Hand with us once a month. We lean on Mr. Hand's expertise and experience in a segment that we call Hand on Government. And Chris, as we're getting ready to leave 2020 behind, 2026 doesn't look like it's going to be boring with all the issues that we see ahead. Let's start with economy and inflation. We know President Trump spoke this week in a primetime address, and one of the things he certainly talked about was the economy. But I think some other people are saying, no, we have some trouble in the economy that the White House isn't necessarily in favor of discussing right now.
Kent, there are going to be three key issues in 2026: affordability, affordability, and affordability. That has been the dominant issue in American politics, really going back 2 years now, when Joe Biden was running for re-election, then when he stepped aside and Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee. That presidential election really turned on the issue of inflation and affordability. That really facilitated the return of Donald Trump to the White House. Well, now the shoe is on the other foot. He's president, and there are still these affordability concerns, whether that's inflation, whether that's specifically housing costs or health care or other particular items that Americans are sort of feeling that economic pain, again, likely to continue into 2026 for a variety of reasons. Some of it is data-driven, Kent. We've now got inflation that's about 4.5%. That's sort of the highest point it's been in quite some time. Wage growth is at its lowest point in 4 years. It's about 3.5%. Inflation's been kind of right around 3%. There is actually a jobs report, a new inflation report that just came out that showed actually a little bit under 3%. But again, wages are not really growing fast enough. They're just barely keeping up with cost increases. People are feeling that in every aspect of their lives, whether that's going to the grocery store, whether that's putting gas in the car, whether that's buying health insurance. We're going to talk more, I'm sure, about the impact of the end of certain subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. All of that is hitting Americans very hard in the pocketbook for a number of reasons, including tariffs, just general economic conditions. Those are the types of issues on which elections like the one that are going to happen in 2026 often turn. So
let's definitely talk about health insurance costs. This is something that has been in the news. The reason for a government shutdown lasting as long as it did was because they're talking about these COVID-era subsidies, and they aren't going to be extended at the end of this year. There's also a recent article with the headline, "Why Florida is Ground Zero for the Coming Obamacare Storm." This is an issue, and certainly we're going to see it throughout the state of Florida as well.
More than any other state, Floridians use the Affordable Care Act exchange to get their health insurance coverage. There are 4.7 million Floridians that get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act exchanges. Some of the current projections, Kent, are that if these subsidies go away at the end of the year, as it looks like they're going to do because Congress has not yet taken action on them, a third of those Floridians may lose their health insurance coverage. So 1.5 out of more than 4.5 million Floridians. Add to that, those who do keep their coverage are likely to see an average premium increase of about 132%, or more than $500 a month. Those are huge numbers for the basic necessity of having health insurance. It's obviously going to cause significant hardship for a lot of Floridians and people around the country who are similarly impacted. And I think you're going to see a lot of pushback when those subsidies actually do expire and people have to go and either try and pay their health insurance bills or, in some very sad cases, have to drop their health insurance altogether because it has simply become unaffordable.
Well, the Republican perspective in this, saying, no, we're not going to extend these subsidies, is, hey, that was for COVID. That was for the pandemic. That's why people needed the extra money to help with health care. But what we just talked about, the previous topic, with inflation and with wage growth being below, I mean, if it's even to inflation, that's not enough to catch up because inflation did so much damage compared to the average wage for American workers anyway. There's this balance going on, and it's tough to see how it's going to work out in favor of Joe average consumer, especially somebody who does rely on the marketplace for health care?
Well, Kent, there has been sort of a bipartisan push to try and do something by the end of 2025 in the House. Obviously, most Democrats are aligned behind the idea of extending for some period of time the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Just in the last week, 4 members of the House Republican caucus have joined them in signing what's called a discharge petition, trying to get this issue directly on the House floor without having to go through any committees and that sometimes lengthy and cumbersome process to try and move this issue forward. So it's not just one party or the other. There are members of both parties trying to seek some relief on this, Ken. And even if there were to be changes in the Affordable Care Act or the health care model, those who are arguing for an extension say we need to give people time. Even if we're going to make people changes, the longer they have to plan to make other arrangements to try and kind of shift what they're doing so they can maintain the health care coverage, the better off we are. The problem is, for a lot of people, health insurance costs are going to, I was going to say, fall off a cliff, but really rise up a cliff on January 1st because of some of these subsidies going away.
Before we take a short commercial break here, I know that AI regulation is becoming a topic here. A few years ago, it goes, hey, what is AI? Hey, will it take my job? Now it's, hey, it's coming. Who's going to regulate this? I know the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, wants states to be able to regulate. The president says he wants to keep states out of it. How are we going to see this play out in 2026?
Well, this is an area of kind of direct conflict between the state of Florida and the federal government. Governor DeSantis has made it clear this is going to be one of his top priorities for his final year in office. He wants Florida to be able to craft Florida-specific regulations to deal with AI issues here in Florida. He's particularly focused on trying to protect child safety, helping to manage kind of data centers, which come in and obviously use a lot of energy and water, and there are both positive and negatives to their influence. So the governor has laid out what he calls a Citizens' Bill of Rights on AI that he wants to try and advance through the legislature. And he and other governors around the state feel like states should be the laboratory of AI regulation reform. See what happens at the state level before you make national decisions. The Trump White House has taken a very different perspective. They want a single national framework. Just in the last week, the president has signed an executive order in which he would, he's basically telling states, do not regulate AI in certain areas. If you do, we're going to have the Justice Department potentially initiate litigation against you. We may look into holding back some federal funds in that case. Now, there are some areas they say the executive order doesn't touch, like child safety, but still, this is going to set up a pretty direct conflict between the state of Florida, which wants to craft its own Florida-specific solution, and the Trump administration. 2026, we'll see that conflict play out.
Yeah, all right. I appreciate that. And we are going to stay in Florida because when we come back, we're going to turn to the Florida legislative session. That starts in just a few weeks. One of the key issues, what happens with proposals to slash property taxes? That's our discussion point next on This Week in Jacksonville. Don't go anywhere.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
Government law attorney Chris Hand is with us. We're talking about the legislative session in the state of Florida. It's a 60-day session, and it begins here middle of January, January 13th. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance the first day. And really, in these last couple of months, they've been having committee meetings, a lot of legislation, or at least the precursor to votes for legislation has been happening. One of the things that the state has to do every year during this legislative session, pass a budget. What's at stake here? Because this is the final year of Ron DeSantis as governor, and he's already put out, here's my budget proposal. But we've seen recently, these last couple of sessions specifically, lawmakers aren't just rubber stamping the governor's budget. They're saying we might have other ideas.
Well, Ken, just to be clear, under the Florida Constitution, the only thing the legislature has to do in the 60-day session is pass a budget, or at least do so before the fiscal year expires on June the 30th, 2026. So the budget is something the legislature takes very seriously. Obviously, a huge part of each session is devoted to kind of amending whatever budget a governor proposes and ultimately getting that to the final point where they can send a budget to the governor for signature. This year, the dynamics are, I think people have really begun to see those dynamics shift over the last couple of years. During the first say 2/3 of the governor's term, the legislature was pretty accepting of his budget proposals. That has now changed to some extent. Particularly the state house has been much more resistant. That's nothing new for governors toward the end of their terms, but it's the first time we've seen it with Governor DeSantis' administration. He has now proposed his budget for the year, which is a $117 billion with a B dollar budget. It's about $3 billion more than the budget that's currently in place right now. He's investing money in things like teacher salaries, Everglades restoration, a variety of water projects, putting some more money in the state's rainy day funds. But again, that's simply a proposal. It now goes to the legislature. The appropriations committees there will take up the budget, make changes to it, and ultimately send it back to the governor, where he has the option to line item veto or sign the entire budget. If last year's any guide, where they had to go extra time, significantly extra time, in order to pass a budget.
Down to the wire.
That's right, really almost down to June 30th. This year's process will probably be similar because, again, it is his last budget. The legislature is now sort of, exercising its status as a co-equal branch of government. So his introduction of his proposed budget is just Act 1 in what is likely going to be a multi-act production.
One of the big headlines is both the governor and then lawmakers are saying, hey, we want to provide property tax relief. There are different ideas about that. How do we see House, Senate, and eventually the executive branch finding some common ground here?
Well, what's really interesting, Ken, is again where each of these different stakeholders, the governor, the Senate, and the House, are positioned. The governor's been talking about property tax relief for a while. He has sort of generally signaled that what he would like to do is eliminate property taxes on all homestead property, people who use a property as their primary residence. That would have a very significant fiscal impact, particularly on city and county governments. Just right here in the city of Jacksonville, the total budget is general fund budget is about $2 billion. Eliminating the property taxes on homestead property would account to about $400 million. So basically a fifth of the budget. That's a huge impact. The state Senate has largely been quiet on this issue, just kind of waiting to see how it develops. The state House, led by Speaker Danny Perez, through a large select committee, has put forward a number of proposals, different proposals that might ultimately go on the ballot. That's really the key to this, Kent. Because property taxes are enshrined in the state constitution, any change to that has to be passed by the voters on the November ballot. So what we'll see in this session is a lot of jockeying between the governor, the House, and the Senate as to which, if any, proposals they will ultimately approve. A supermajority of both the House and the Senate have to approve a proposal for it to go on the ballot. So this session will really be about what, if any, proposals are they going to put on the ballot, at which point the arena shifts to the November general election.
And if one of those was passed and you remove that revenue, 20% of the budget for the city of Jacksonville you're just talking about, that really puts the pressure on municipalities. How are we going to pay for really important services, right?
Well, that's exactly right. Remember, these property taxes go to fund core services, things like police and fire, public works, parks, garbage collection, the kinds of things the local governments are, the kind of services they're known for providing. A variety of these House proposals, some of them exempt schools from any, impact on property taxes. Others say that, law enforcement has to be exempted from it. That's why really, as they say, the old expression, the devil's in the details. Yeah. That's very much the case here because, again, cities and counties across Florida, I think, are very concerned about what these impacts could be. In fact, the Florida League of Cities just in the last week put out a report showing the kind of declines in revenue that could happen if something like this were to pass. There are a variety of proposals that do not go as far as what the governor is recommending, so the fiscal impact would obviously be less, but I think you'll have to see counties and cities look for alternative funding sources in the event that something like this is passed.
I did want to point out what could be good news for Northeast Florida. After the November election, 2 local people are going to be in leadership positions in their respective chambers of the state legislature. So Representative Sam Garrison from Fleming Island, he's going to become Speaker of the House. Senator Tracy Davis of Jacksonville should become the Senate Democratic leader. What's the impact, do you think? Because you pointed out they seem to work well together, and obviously Senate and House here, but is there a potentially good impact, I guess, for our region.
Yes, this is a potentially good news story for Northeast Florida later in 2026. After this current election, the House will, formally elect a new speaker. That'll be Representative Garrison, who's already kind of, set for that position. And Senate Democrats will elect a new leader again. Already decided that's going to be Tracy Davis. It's always a positive thing for a region when people from that region are in these key leadership positions in Tallahassee. It's especially positive when two of them are doing it at the same time and they have a close working relationship, as soon-to-be Speaker Garrison and soon-to-be Leader Davis have demonstrated repeatedly that they have a good working relationship. That could really pay dividends for all of Northeast Florida during the 2 years that they serve in those positions, from the end of 2026 through the end of 2028.
And you would think maybe for the entire state, when cross party lines and even in different chambers here, you can say, let's find some common ground and let's work together on this. We're going to work together on a short commercial break, and then we'll be back because there are some big stakes on Capitol Hill in the coming year, and a vital vote in the Sunshine State. Which party takes the leadership reins and how? Stay with us. We'll talk about it on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Chris Hand is with us. Chris, how likely is it Democrats are going to be able to retake the House and or the Senate in the United States Congress in this coming year with midterm elections coming up?
Well, Kent, we're still about 11 months away from knowing that for sure, and a lot can change in that period. But midterm elections historically don't go well for the party that's in power, which right now is the Republicans. They control the White House and both houses of Congress. So historically, whatever party has that level of control is usually going to lose some level of that control in the midterm elections. We've got some evidence in 2025 that at least one chamber of the House could be going toward, of the Congress could be going toward a change. Democrats have on average overperformed their 2024 results in 2025 special elections or regular elections like the governor's races in Virginia, New Jersey. They've overperformed by an average about 14 or 15 points. That plus some of the affordability concerns, I think, increasingly has political analysts and commentators predicting a Democratic takeover of the House next November. That's part of why you're seeing some of this activity on redistricting to potentially try and mitigate some of that. But I think if people were to guess today what's going to happen, seems more likely than not that Democrats, who are only behind in the House by 2 or 3 seats at this point, would take it over. The Senate's much more difficult for the Democrats to do that. It's not impossible, but they would need to win a bunch of seats or several seats in states they normally don't win in order to be successful there. So I think the current thinking is more likely than not the Democrats retake the House. Probably as we sit here today, more likely than not the Republicans hold the Senate, but a lot of time left before voters will actually make that decision next November.
I know Florida Democratic Party celebrating. There's a change in leadership in Miami with the mayor's seat, that a Democrat has been elected there, and typically that was a Republican stronghold. I also see Republican Party of Florida leadership saying, yeah, but that doesn't matter. We're going to win everywhere in 2026. A lot of bluster. We'll have to see what it really comes down to as we get along the way. Specific to the governor's office, 28 years, is that right? 28 years, Florida's governor's office has been held by a Republican. How do Democrats change that? Is that possible in this coming year, or what kind of factors go into that?
Well, you're going to see kind of robust primaries on both sides. There are several candidates running for the Republican nomination. You've interviewed several of them already, and probably more to come. Also on the Democratic side, there's multiple candidates, primarily Orange County Executive Jerry Demings, former member of Congress David Jolly. So there's going to be a lot of activity leading up to those August primaries. The major advantage that Republicans have in the state right now, number one, is a significant voter registration advantage. There are 1.4 million more Republicans than Democrats in the state. That's a significant hurdle for Democrats to overcome. Now, there are also a large and growing number of so-called NPA, or no party affiliation voters, who become the swing voters in these races. So that's going to be somewhat key to whether Democrats have any kind of chance in the November election. So you've got that voter registration gap. Republicans also enjoy kind of a stronger infrastructure in terms of turning out voters funding to kind of help support candidates.
Fundraising seems to be on the Republican side.
It is, and because of recent results, some of the national fundraising that used to come in for Democrats has somewhat abated in recent years. So I think the most important factor for Democrats is to kind of solve that math problem. Robustly register voters, try to close that 1.4, almost 1.5 million gap in voter registration. If they can do that and come up with messaging and effective campaigning to reach those key NPA voters, they can begin to have a chance in the state again. But as long as the math problem remains what it is, that's a tough hurdle to climb.
Final minute. Will, in 2026, Florida be purple again? Will it become a swing state once again?
I think becoming a swing state is probably a longer-term goal. It's certainly possible. We don't know a lot of things yet. What will the national environment be like if Democrats are continuing to overperform at these 14 and 15-point levels? That might make the state more competitive, although, again, it's hard sometimes to draw lessons from one year to the next. So overperformance could be an issue. How no-party affiliation voters split could be an issue. But I think it's going to take time, multiple cycles, for Democrats to turn Florida again into a purple state. There could be unique situations this year, but I think for long-term sustainability, that requires time.
For those of us who like to watch the politics play out, it's more fun when it could go either way, when there's less certainty about it. But it's also fun just getting to talk through some of these issues and what we see ahead in 2026. Chris Hand, thanks for your time today.
Ken, happy holidays.
Thank you to you, too. All right, so we're going to be talking to various lawmakers ahead of the legislative session in Florida, including a couple people I mentioned earlier, future Speaker of the House and the next Senate Minority Leader, both from Northeast Florida. I'm Ken Justice. Thanks for watching today on air on Channel 4, and you'll find us online on news4jax.com. And I want to invite you to make sure you're streaming on News4JAX Plus. And don't forget to check out This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. This episode of our podcast, we're looking at the growing franchise opportunities in Northeast Florida and beyond. You can find new episodes every Thursday at 9. You'll find it right now on News4JAX Plus under the channel This Week in Jacksonville.
See why every day more people are choosing News4JAX, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.